All right, listen. The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine. Underneath, it's a hyperalloy combat chassis. Microprocessor controlled, fully armored, very tough. But outside, it's living human tissue. Flesh, skin, hair, blood, grown for the cyborgs.
Look, Reese, I don't know what you want.
Pay attention!
Hey everybody, you thought we were dead. We were laying on the floor. You should have shot us with a few more shots from that large caliber weapon. This is the Real Ripe and Real Rotten podcast. We've returned after an extremely long hiatus. It was not the death. We were not terminated. We're back to talk about it. My name is Wes. I'm joined by Clay, who's a few cans short of a six-pack himself. Clay, how are you?
It's good, except it's wash day, so there's nothing clean, right?
I wash my laundry every single goddamn day, so I don't know what that punk is talking about. That
That's because you got three kids.
That's
all
right.
all you have to do in your spare time is laundry.
It's just shit and vomit on everything, and I wash it all endlessly. And I don't end up looking like Arnold does at the end of this movie because I'm spick and span. So this is Real Ripe, Real Rotten. We've returned. The whole gimmick of this podcast is that we watch the highest and lowest rated film on some actor or director or film producer, I suppose, filmography. We use Rotten Tomatoes to figure out which is the best and the worst of their career. We talk about them.
Can't wait to do the best and worst of Jerry Bruckheimer.
And we're going to be back with extremely middling things for a few people. We've talked about Russell Crowe. We've talked about Ridley Scott. Maybe we just did Ridley Scott. We did Patrick Stewart. That's all ancient history. But the podcast is back, and it's ready to continue. And as we said 5 years ago when we ended the first time, Arnold is going to be in the next one, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So
was it 5? Has it been 5
no,
years?
it's been 3 years. 2020 was when Real Ripe ended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Here we are.
Time flies.
So here we are. And we're going to be talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. The best movie is Terminator, which we're going to be talking about. The worst one is End of Days, which we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks. And
I'm
then
so excited about End of Days.
To keep things snazzy, the B-roll function will also be returning. The B-roll is where we choose a lesser-known, maybe hidden classic or something along those lines of the actor or director's career. And we're going to decide what that is. It's going to be at patreon.com/thepenskyfile, patreon.com/thepenskyfile. So if you support the show there, you can hear the B-roll, which we'll be talking about for Arnold. But I have not figured out which films I want to do yet. But we'll get to that point when we get to it.
Arnold is a really interesting one for a B-roll because there's a lot of really good ones to choose from.
My opinion, there was one, I do not remember what it was called. It came out in the late 80s, and he plays like a Russian general or something.
Oh, Red Heat?
Red Heat. That was directed by Walter Hill, which has the
No
Deadwood
shit.
tie-in. And I was thinking, I've never even heard of this, so maybe this is going to be my choice for the B-roll.
It must be great.
It's like his first serious role, though, I think. Like it's like where he's not playing an android or like a Marine in the jungle or anything,
sure,
you know?
sure,
So it's we'll say.
Yeah, there's that one. There's the Jim Belushi one he did. I think it's tough because, I mean, what is the he's someone where the criteria for a B-roll is like, do we do something that is a hidden gem, or do we just go like, we're never going to do Terminator 2 anytime other time, so let's do Terminator 2.
I'm not going to do Terminator 2, I think, and I'm also not going to do Conan, just because I'm not interested. So it's going to be something else.
Okay.
And I think we've already done Predator, so we're down to a few things.
We have, yes.
This is it. This is Terminator. It's at 100% on the Rotten Tomatometer. 100% out of 70 reviews. The audience score is 89% out of like 250,000 reviews. So we've got a good sense of where people think about that one. This one, with its impressive action sequences, taut economic direction, and relentlessly fast pace, it's clear why the Terminator continues to be an influence on sci-fi and action flicks. That is what Rotten Tomatoes has to say about it. It came out October 26, 1984. It's an hour and 48 minutes. It's a sci-fi action mystery thriller in which, disguised as a human, a cyborg assassin known as the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, travels from 2029 to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton. Sent to protect Sarah is Kyle Reese, Michael Biehn, who divulges the coming of Skynet, an artificial intelligence system that will spark a nuclear holocaust.
I am legitimately shocked that this is not rated higher. I'm sorry, that this is rated higher than Terminator 2.
Yeah, Terminator 2 is only slightly lower, but I mean, Let me start us off with a patron comment here. People who support us at patreon.com/thepensky-files, because this sums up a lot of the Patreon thoughts. Let's see. I'll go with Jason. J-Keys Gamer says, welcome back, Real Ripe. As for the Terminator, I'm sure others will agree and have stated that the sequel is superior, but it never would have happened without this film. The concept is a great marriage of sci-fi and slasher films with a unique for the time premise. The acting is good, the script is lean, and the special effects are pretty great if you ask me. 4 out of 5. Also, fun retro gaming fact, on the box art for the original NES Metal Gear game, the image of Solid Snake is a straight-up drawn copy of Kyle Reese from this movie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That happened all the time. Like if you look at the cover for Contra, it's a straight-up trace of Arnold from Predator and
Stallone, right?
Stallone from Rambo 2. Yeah, it's a tough call because like I feel like I go back and forth all the time about which one I like better. The contrarian in me a lot of times will say the first Terminator. Yeah. But Terminator 2 is just like it's undeniable. It's like everything in this movie jacked up to 11. Yeah.
I was thinking about it, and we're not going to be talking about Terminator 2, but it is like a good starting point for it. I was thinking of there's a band that I found recently called The Sound, which has their first 2 albums are considered like the best that they ever did out of their 5, and it's kind of the same argument, right? Which is that the second one is like very consistent and well produced, and everything is like everything in the second album is the first one done to perfection, really. Yeah. But I still go back to the first one, and it has an energy that the second one can't capture again. It's like there's something about the rough around the edges thing that makes it slightly like a little bit more appealing. And I don't know. I would probably also have to say that Terminator 2 is better in a lot of ways, and maybe it's the better movie just as the way that the second Sound album is the better album. But I still, I kind of understand why the first one has a higher Rotten Tomato score for whatever that is worth, because I think it's kind of like, it's like one of the most effective. It's not an indie movie, but it's like there's like no real budget to this movie at all, you know. And it's super simple. And I was thinking that you could have made this as an indie production on a very shoestring budget, and not much would have really changed from it. And I think that's kind of an impressive place for it to end up anyway.
Yeah, I think the album analogy is pretty spot on, because it's like it's like when a band like Queen or something, you listen to an early album from Queen and it's a little bit rough around the edges, but all the pieces are there. And then there's a certain point where Queen turns into the arena rock band and is doing these undeniable classic songs in a very polished way. Yeah. But it doesn't quite have the same charm as the more gritty early stuff.
Right, yeah. That charm is a good word to describe it. There's something in a lot of ways, like I guess that the original one feels like more of an accomplishment, even though it's not a low budget movie really, but it feels like it's more of a statement. And also just when you go back to the first one, you realize that the second one takes an awful lot from the first one and just spins it in a different way. You know, it kind of repeats it over and over again, like not in a derivative way, but in a way that's like, oh, it's kind of clever that they did it again, but from a different angle, but it is still doing the same idea over again.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that sequels get a lot of shit for nowadays. It's just that T2 does it so well that they hide it a lot better than a lot of sequels do now, where they do callbacks to because now when they do that stuff, people always turn their nose up to it. Yeah. But T2 inverts and subverts so well that it's really difficult to be mad at it. Yeah. But we should probably, I guess we should talk about the actual first one.
Terminator, the first one. So here's my question. Open it up. We have where you have a sister podcast, which is also tomato based, which talks about horror movies. It's called Rotten Horror Picture Show. Why is this not a horror movie?
I wouldn't say that it isn't. Okay. I think it very much is. I think it's
Is this one of the 200 greatest? Let's just spread out across all podcasts.
You know, that's a great question. I'll actually look. I'm not sure if it is on our list. I think it is definitely taking advantage of what was the genre style of the time, which is the slasher movie.
Yes.
Because it is very much kind of 2 steps away from a Halloween movie or a Friday the 13th movie. It's just that kind of thing, just jacked way up.
Yeah.
It's, plugged into a gigantic amplifier.
Michael Myers sharpening his machete with a flint or whatever, and the guy going, "You can't do that in here."
Yeah. But yeah, I think this rides that same line as something like Alien, where it is a science fiction movie, but it has a lot of horror DNA baked into it, and that's one of the things that makes it so special and makes it work so well.
Because
it is not on our list, by the way. It is not on the Horror Picture Show list.
I actually wouldn't say that it's a horror movie, but even by my own definition, it is a horror movie, but it does not feel like a horror movie. Like, I was also thinking about this. Clearly, like, the DNA from this is also wide enough, and the movie's been so influential. This is essentially It Follows, as a horror movie,
yeah.
But what I think is so makes it not a horror movie, I guess, is the fact that you spend so much time with the Terminator, like watching what it's doing, that it loses all. Like, I just think about if you did It Follows and they kept cutting back to the monster, like walking down the road, and it's like catching up to things. But you spend so much time with the Terminator, and Arnold's performance is so, like, his acting performance is not strong enough where he's like terrifying, really. Like, it's. I just thought it was an interesting point of view that it's not. To me, it does not explicitly read like a horror movie, even though I think it is a horror movie if you tweaked it ever so slightly and you didn't show him so much.
Yeah, I also think it just has too much. Its foot is too much in the action bin. Yeah. Because like horror movies very rarely have this much action. I mean, I think did we have a similar conversation with Predator about whether Predator would classify as a horror movie?
Oh, I don't know, but
I can't remember.
Yeah, I would say that's even less of a horror movie, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, this is much more of an action film that has horror and sci-fi trappings to it. I would say action first, sci-fi second, horror third.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that fair, do you think?
That's fair. I think it's a and I guess it's maybe for the original, I guess that calling it an action movie seems to overstate it, because it's more like it's like a thriller, like just kind of because the thing that makes it less of an action movie, although Predator falls into this too, is that like the reason it's also surprising it's not really a horror movie is that they're clearly no match for the Terminator, and like all that you can do is run from this thing and hope that you can evade it for long enough. And the action spectacle seems to get kicked up in the second one because you then have Arnold as the lead character who can take all the action for you.
Yeah.
And in this one, they have to mostly run away from it, which would incline you to think that it's more like a horror thriller type thing. But I would call it an action movie. I'd call it action thriller, I suppose, is like its main genre that it fits into.
Yeah, it's tough to see a movie with so much running and gunning.
Yeah.
And not immediately call it an action movie.
Yeah. A lot of car chases in this.
Yeah, a lot of car. There's very few car chases in most horror movies.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but very rarely.
It's just Stephen King, right? And then the truck is chasing or whatever.
Yeah, then the car chase is the monster somehow.
There's a shocking amount of car chases in this movie. They spend 80% of the being hunted by the Terminator thing in a car, I think.
They do. Yeah. Well, you got to get away.
Yeah.
You got to do whatever you can to get away. Yeah.
Let me see. I'm just looking through the facts here. Well, I guess anywhere to start with this. What's your like mental third mind's eye vision of the Terminator at this point? Where does it stand for you?
I'll tell you. Ever since I saw Terminator 2, I've had a certain date in the back of my head. And that date is 2029.
Yep.
And we are getting damn close.
We've passed many other movie dates, but this one's still.
And we are not. I'm not totally confident that the future of this movie is not going to be what 2029 in real life actually is.
It's kind of a neat, like, it's one of those weird ideas that it's like it's correct and also weirdly incorrect about how this would actually happen. It's like it's got a 1980s viewpoint about what the robot overlords would look like. It's the Star Trek, like the pad problem. It's like there's a
yes.
pad for everything instead of
Yes.
recognizing that we'll have one pad and you can download different things onto it.
Yeah.
This has the robot AI army for some reason builds these hulking machines to do stuff, and it doesn't just sort of like operate as a more sophisticated type evil, but it's funny to me. It's also, in 2029, the only cars that you'll have were 1984 Buicks at the same time too.
Well, it was the only thing left.
Yeah.
Because 1997, everything got blown up. I think the thing that is easy to forget about this movie is this really, there's so much stuff has been influenced by this. This is definitely like a core 20th century sci-fi text as far as movies and TV go. It's probably the most influential post-apocalyptic sci-fi next to Road Warrior.
Yep. I would say it's not even close. Yeah, Road Warrior. Yeah, I understand what you mean, but yeah, it's like not even a competition in my eyes.
Yeah, more so for Road Warrior, and more for
Terminator. Like I understand the influences, but I think it's like from a pop culture point of view, I think Terminator is like the one that like Road Warrior is more like the arty aspect, I think, to it, but Terminator has been like the idea.
Well, I was thinking Road Warrior more in the idea of the future, a post-apocalyptic wasteland idea, where everybody is, everything that has been made is the only thing that's left to use. You know what I mean?
See.
Where it's when people did realize they could do science fiction in the future.
Yep.
If they shoot it in a garbage dump, because
Gotcha.
trash gives you a lot of production value,
a lot of angles.
Yeah, which they do in this too. I think that like the opening. I think what's so smart about this is they give you little bits and pieces of the future stuff, and the future stuff is so well realized that it's only like maybe 5 or 6 minutes of the movie total.
Yeah,
give across like the 3 scenes, but it's just so effective in its depiction of this future war where the Earth has been squished. You get a lot of mileage out of running some tank treads over a bunch of skulls.
Yeah, it's so nice they did it twice. Yeah, the future scenes are nice, and half of them is actually just a dream that Reese has, which is kind of like there's only one real flashback, if you believe that the Terminator infiltration into the base is something that actually happened to him, which it seems to be. But yeah, they don't. I think the movie is It's like the perfect amount of going into like modern movies and the sequels that you're talking about, how like the Terminator 2 redoing the first one would be kind of poo-pooed at this point. This is from the pinnacle of movie making sci-fi era, at least, where there was an understanding about the correct amount of exposition that you need in a movie. Yeah. And I actually think that the exposition scenes in this movie are the worst parts of the movie by far. When Reese is like sitting next to Sarah Connor and yelling at her, trying to explain something.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because I think that T2 does that exposition a lot better, but it also is one of those things where I've seen this movie so many times. Because I'm so familiar with it, I find Reese to be an unrealistic portrayal of what a time traveler going back in time would be like.
Okay.
So like we can get more into like the exposition and stuff, but my takeaway from Reese is always, after you watch this movie 100 times, when he shows up, you go, this was a man who was born after Judgment Day happened. Right?
Yeah.
He does not seem blown away by anything that he runs into. And he's not familiar with any of it. It would be like
you only got so much time, man.
I understand, but like from a thriller point of view, it makes sense that he hits the ground running and goes. But the more that I think about the way that Reese acts throughout all of this movie, the more that I see like the moviness to it, like the sort of like the strings they have to pull. But he's very adept at fitting into a timeline. That's like me going back to the age of the dinosaurs and successfully mounting one and like riding it into battle at the something like that. But doesn't happen.
I think there's there's a little bit of leeway you can give him just for plot purposes, but for the most part, You know, he steals clothes from a homeless guy, and then he ends up in a clothing store, and then he ends up finding a gun. You know, so
Yeah,
like
he knows what the Velcro on shoes is for.
That's true.
It's like little things like that always make me.
Well,
laugh.
I mean, the future, even though it is very uniquely defined, it is still the future of the '80s, which somehow involved a lot of headbands.
Yes, there's a lot.
So I'm sure there's a lot of Velcro too.
A lot of hairspray and a lot of headbands against the battle of the robots and stuff.
Yeah.
No, they hide it well. Again, this is one of those things that you literally only think about when you've seen the movie 100 times.
Well, you know, it's funny, the exposition thing. I don't disagree with you, but I actually found myself liking the exposition scenes more than I remembered because I haven't watched this in a while. This is one I've seen 100 times, but it's been a bit since I've watched this one. And I found myself thinking, man, Reese really does sound like a complete crazy person.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, you know, when he's explaining everything to Sarah in the car, he's doing so in such a way where if you don't know that the Terminator is a real thing, he just sounds like a complete psychopath.
Why didn't you bring any weapons? Something more advanced? Don't you have ray guns?
Ray guns.
Show me a piece of future technology.
You go naked. Something about the field generated by a living organism. Nothing dead will go. I didn't build the fucking thing!
Okay. But this cyborg, if it's metal...
Surrounded by living tissue.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they do an interesting thing where normally the hero in this movie has some reason to not explain the backstory. Like that.
Yeah.
That feels like a very modern Star Trek thing almost. Like in order to make it seem, in order for him to try to convince Sarah Connor, he tries to trick her at first in like a modern retake of this. And in this one, it's neat because he seems to have no qualms about sort of spoiling the future. Like he doesn't believe that telling these things will cause the future to not unfold.
He has one moment where he's like, I don't know if I should tell you all this stuff. And then he goes, well, anyway, so we'd only go out at night, and the robots, they rule everything. Your son's really cool.
And it's also, it has this strong moment of writing where he's being interrogated by the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is like, he asks like a very plot related. He's like, how come you can't just do this? He's like, I don't fucking build the thing. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things I like about the way they construct it, right? Because they really, Cameron really constructs the mechanism to make the way that Reese explains it as unbelievable as possible. So like when the doctor says, well, how are you going to get back to home? And he's like, I can't. They blew the machine up. It's like, well, of course they blew the machine up, which is why you're stuck here in the past. Of course, buddy. Like, so they work that stuff in. So when you do get that scene where he's talking to the psychiatrist, there's nothing he says that would make them believe for a second that he's not just insane.
I completely agree with that. And I think it's an excellent, like, the way that they ground Reese's story in the world of the movie, he does come across as totally crazy, and all the plot reasons, as you're saying, for why he can't do certain things sound like the excuses of a crazy person who just can't come up with a real rationale. It did expose to me the one weakness, which is that when they're like, he's like, how come you didn't bring a gun back? And he's like, well, the only flesh goes through. They're like, what about the robot? He's like, it's covered in flesh. It hides it or whatever. It's like, Kyle Reese, you're not going to keister a ray gun for the future of humanity? You're not gonna,
Great question.
You're not going to come back with a pig carcass with a ray gun shoved up its ass? And
or like, you know, a mini nuclear bomb shoved right up your butt.
Kyle Reese not willing to go all the way, I suppose, for this, which is very disappointing for the future.
Yeah, it's I find the thinking about that scene when they're in the car and he's explaining everything, just how nuts it sounds when he's like, the 600 model, they had rubber skin, so they were easy to spot.
Yeah.
But the new ones, it's just like, okay, all right. Thank you for saving my life, I guess.
Yep. I'll be going now.
Yeah. And that, you know, it's funny too, because they do a good job. This is a great movie. Well, I was going to say this is a great movie to watch if you haven't seen the trailer, but they make it pretty clear pretty quickly who is the bad guy here.
Yeah.
Although I don't 100% know if someone who watched this for the first time without knowing anything about it wouldn't think that Reese was also going after Sarah Connor. Like that there was no good, because he's not exactly presented as a heroic type. He's like, looks like a homeless person.
No, the only thing that weakens him is that the time travel obviously hurts him so much. That it's like that. Yeah. That seems to imply it. But Amy watched this for the first time, not this time, but the last time that we watched it, and she had never seen it before, and she loved it. But she knew immediately who the good, and that might just be cultural, but she identified Reese as the good guy immediately.
Oh, sure, yeah. He is the one who's not kicking down the doors of old ladies' houses.
Right.
I say old lady. That woman is 35.
Well, I mean, Linda Hamilton and her friend are like 22, and it's like they look like they're 45 years old. In this,
when they that first Sarah Connor that gets killed, I had every single time I've watched this is like, oh, she's like probably almost a grandmother. She's 35.
Yeah, she's
5 years younger than me.
It was a bad era for hair in general fashion. What was I thinking about there was something about what the hell were we just talking about? We were talking about
the knowing which one is the good guy.
Yes, that's one of those clever inversions that T2 does, because Arnold's coming back. You are unsure about what side that he's on in that one.
Yeah.
I think this movie is really extremely well made for an action movie. I think that, watching it again, I think the acting is a little bit subpar compared to what comes later, and T2 in particular and stuff like that. I think that the special effects have been aged terrifically. They're kind of charming, but they haven't aged well. The thing that I think that is aged superbly is the editing of this movie is absurd. Yeah. It's
fantastic.
I think the editing made the movie, really. I don't know who edited it. Maybe Cameron had a hand in it or something, but it's just a lot of cuts, and it's very effective at telling the story through a lot of cuts, and the car chase scenes and everything like that are just tons of cuts. The police massacre is just cut. It's like, I don't know how it stacks up against other movies, and maybe it doesn't really set any kind of records or anything, but it just feels like there's a lot of cutting in this movie, putting it all together. And it was impressive. It was something that I noticed this past time watching it.
There's a lot of cutting, but it never you never lose it. Like it all. Cameron is just so good at making sure you understand what is going on, what the direction of the action is, who's involved. So when things get really hectic, like that, like the police shoot up scene, you never really feel disoriented about like what's going on or where anybody is or any of those car chases or anything. He's he's a master at what he does.
Yeah, it's very good. It's the car chase scenes in particular are just when you sit and pay attention to it, it's like it's such a difficult thing to direct and understand, and just as like the weakest of video editors that I am myself, the amount of work that has to go into that is absurd. And it's just like, this is just a ridiculous amount of work.
That putting a film together in general is a friggin' miracle. Not even saying making a great one, just making one that's like passably good. Mm-hmm. Because especially with something like this, the amount of footage that you're shooting, while you have to mentally, or hopefully you have someone on the crew who's doing this for you, keep track of positions and orientation, and this setup is where this guy goes from left to right, so that means the next setup we have to make sure he comes out from the right side of the that kind of stuff. For these big sequences, which I'm sure they storyboarded out or whatever, but it's just a lot of preparation and keeping things coherent in your own brain to make this stuff work,
and not missing the key connective shot. It's like you just have to have all the shots. I guess if you don't, you can edit around it. But there's a sense that there are key moments that you need to show in the film, and to make sure that you get them.
Yeah, it's always crazy to me how movie making and the illusion of the motion picture works, where you can have a scene that falls apart halfway through because it's too hard to follow. And then you can go, okay, we need to put in a close-up of him picking up a set of keys right here.
Yep.
And you do that, and the whole thing clicks together.
Yeah. Hat on patreon.com/thepensky File says, as a massive fan of the Terminator franchise, I might be a little biased, but I love this movie. In part, it's because it really has a unique feel compared to the sequels, with it being more in a horror/thriller territory rather than a sci-fi action-adventure film. Watching Arnold meticulously murder every woman named Sarah Connor in the phone book with ruthless efficiency embodies everything I imagine the machine programmed to kill would do. I also felt Michael Biehn as Kyle Reese did a great job portraying a crazed soldier who had lived his entire lifetime without this world. Whenever I show this movie to friends, they always believe Kyle Reese intends to harm Sarah Connor in the first half. Interesting. Due to his cold and desperate demeanor, I also think Sarah Connor is a fairly relatable POV character for the audience, as there doesn't appear to be anything particularly special about her until you finally see a small spark of what will come in the last 15 minutes. Yes, the special effects are dated, the romance is a little unbelievable, and yes, trying to imagine the weird conversation where John Connor gives his friend a picture of his mom is definitely strange, but overall, I think this movie is fantastic. 5 out of 5. So
I do think it's hilarious that the undoing of the Terminator is set in motion, because even though the robots have taken over the Earth and are this omnipotent force, they don't know Sarah Connor's full name and address.
Yes, the records were lost. She did a good job of hiding in Mexico.
Yeah. John has the upper hand because he knows those things, so he can tell that to Kyle, so he can go right to the correct one.
I have another question that's one of these, like, you've seen the movie too much. Do the police jump to the correct conclusion about the Sarah Connor killers too quickly? Do you, in a city like Los Angeles?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, first of all, the fact that there's only 3.
There's only 3. Yeah.
I find that hard to believe. But, yeah, that's one of those things where, like, I can see the news easily jumping to that conclusion the way it does.
Yeah, sure.
So, I can believe the cops trying to maybe get out in front of that. And, if you've got 2 people in the same day named Sarah Connor who've been killed.
Yeah. It's borderline for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, this is one of the, if anyone listens to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, they'll know that my least favorite part of most genre movies are when the cops show up, because it's usually a lazy device for exposition and it makes the movie boring.
Yeah.
I think the cops are used pretty well in this.
Yeah, I like the runner where Bishop says something and the black cop's like, fuck you.
Yes. Yeah. The black cop, that's Captain... shit. Who is he in Wrath of Khan? He gets blasted in Wrath of Khan.
Oh, that's right. It's he's on the planet with Khan. I forget what his name is. I don't know what Bishop Lance Henriksen, I guess, is Bishop's real name. Yeah.
Yeah. Original choice for the Terminator.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, but then I'm sure the studio said, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
Yeah, I guess that brings us to Arnold, right? This is about Arnold.
Sure.
Is Arnold the correct choice for the Terminator?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that the story is that he originally was brought in to in consideration to play Kyle Reese.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Because Cameron's original vision was that the Terminator would be someone more like Lance Henriksen, someone who wouldn't draw attention to themselves.
Yeah, and it's not terrifying in and of themselves, really.
Yeah. But like, if you cast Lance Henriksen as the Terminator and then fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger as Kyle Reese, you'd spend the whole movie going like, why doesn't he just pick him up and snap him in half like the Queen Alien does in Aliens?
I came back in time for you, Sarah Connor.
Yeah. Like, I think there's having the Terminator be someone who's more slight, I think would make it lend itself more to the horror end of things.
Yeah.
But I think Arnold's entire body is a priceless special effect, right?
Yeah.
Having him play that role is immediately going to add an element of the unreal and the heightened reality to that character. And he is imposing enough as it is to believe that he's some sort of otherworldly thing.
Yeah. Yeah, he's it defined him, right? Like, this is, you think the Terminator is the role for Schwarzenegger, right? Like, you say Schwarzenegger, what's the role? And you think of Terminator. He's on a performance level, I think it's fairly weak from him. I like his robot acting in a lot of ways. I think that he's pretty good at that. I'm less he still kind of fucks up the line readings a little bit in this. He doesn't.
He nails the one he needs to nail though, and it became his catchphrase for the next 40 years.
You're saying I'll be back. You're thinking that?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think he nailed that one?
I think he does.
I would have had him say that one again. I think too. His worst one is probably "fuck off, asshole."
Yeah. But even I think again his accent adds to the
Alien.
weirdness
Yeah.
of a robot who's learning swear words.
Yes. Yeah.
And the way he at the beginning he repeats back where he's like, nice night for a walk. He's like, nice night for a walk. It's just there's something weird and marble mouthed about it that kind of fits the character.
Yeah.
But I mean he's got like 8 lines
He
in the
does.
whole movie, I think.
Shockingly. I mean, when you compare it to the second one, it's also I was shocked to sort of realize that the second one is 7 years later, which is unbelievable in terms of modern Hollywood.
Yeah.
But
Aliens is 8 years after the first Alien.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
That is insane. But he says a lot
unthinkable
more.
now. Yeah. Oh yeah.
This one, he's good. Iconic role. Absolutely.
It's amazing too if you think about this guy in his career and how savvy he is about every move that he made. He's already done Conan, right? And so he's looking for his next thing. And I think most people who were in his position had the opportunity to do Terminator would go for the Kyle Reese role because that's the one that requires the capital A acting.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of lines and he's got crazy shit that he says. But Arnold knows that his physical appearance is his secret weapon.
Yep.
And so he can take a movie like this where he has 8 lines in the whole movie and he knows that he's going to be the thing everybody's looking at.
Fair or unfair? We're jumping back to T2, I suppose. Which performance is better? Robert Patrick is the T1000 or Schwarzenegger is the T800? Is he a T800? Whatever he is in this one.
T800.
Yeah.
Cyberdyne Systems Model 101. I'm going to say it's tough because the Schwarzenegger Terminator is an iconic performance regardless of quality, but I think if you're just going on acting performance, probably Robert Patrick.
Patrick is the Lance Hendrickson redo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
he is, yeah.
Yeah. There is a yes, but I think that Patrick in T2 only works because Schwarzenegger is the bigger one in the hero in T2 at the same time. Like I think that it wouldn't work in this one because as you're saying, it's like to have the roles reversed and to have Schwarzenegger as the Reese character is you'd have to do a much better job of selling the Terminator in that way, I think. Like it's just, the T1000 benefits from the fact that you know what the T800 can do and the fact that it beats it.
And Arnold playing the Terminator lends credibility to this idea that this guy is unstoppable.
Right.
He's this juggernaut that you cannot stop. So when he's driving trucks through the walls and stuff, or when he's walking through the police station just taking bullet fire and not like that's you believe that like he definitely has that innate aura of unstoppable monster.
Yeah.
And so when the T1000 comes around, he's arguably, definitely more powerful than the T800 as far as what he can do.
Yeah.
But he's a lot more conniving. He's a smarter, he's a finesse killer.
Yeah.
Whereas the T800 is very much just like let's knock down the building and hope we get the guy we need.
Yeah, it's really the wolf in sheep's clothing, but the sheep costume doesn't fit particularly well, and it's just you just have to get into the pen, right? And then the Terminator can do what it needs to do. That's one of my favorite effective scenes in this one is the flashback to when the Terminator infiltrates the future base.
Yeah, I've always liked that scene. It's really, they do it in a really kind of nightmarish way.
Yeah, ending with his red eyes as he's shooting everything is fantastic too.
I did find it funny this time that as everybody was walking into that place, nobody clocked the gigantic man with the gigantic gun under his cape.
My criticism is you should have the dogs outside the base.
That's true.
Before
you definitely
he gets in.
should. Bad dog placement. That's on them. Also, I was thinking about it. The gun that guy has seems like it's the first iteration of Old Painless.
Oh,
because that gun from Predator, that's the first time anybody's used one of those like hip Gatling guns
Yes,
that, of
yep.
course, Arnold uses in Terminator 2.
Yeah.
But that's basically what this guy's using.
yeah.
But
A
it's
sci-fi
they don't bring
version.
they don't bring a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, I like that scene, but it's like anyone who's been working out excessively in the future wasteland should be treated with suspicion. I think is the way that everyone else is famished, and a Terminator comes in just absolutely fucking yoked, and no one bats an eye at it.
I do. So that scene, that's one thing where I'm a little bit. I've always been a little unsure about whether or not that is something that happened or whether or not that is just a dream.
Yeah.
Because the way that scene is positioned, the visual language is very much implying that this is a dream Sarah is having.
Yes,
Because-
I think all the future. It would be more consistent because his first long flashback is a dream, indeed, that Reese is having.
Right.
Yeah.
But my point is, it's Sarah having the dream, not Reese.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what she is seeing, like the visual language is telling you traditionally that this is Sarah having a dream about this.
Yeah.
So
Just because you mean she's watching Reese, like it's like looking at Reese as opposed to his.
because when they're hanging out and she's like, tell me about whatever, he starts talking and she falls asleep, and from the camera on her they do the transition to this scene.
Yeah, you're right.
And then when it's over, they transition back on her face. So that the read there seems like if this is a dream, it's Sarah's dream. So the thing is, like, the information in that scene is not something she would actually know.
Correct. Yep.
So like I'm wondering if that's where some of that stuff, you can let that stuff slide a little bit because maybe it's a dream she's having based on the stuff that he has told. Because like I always found it weird that he has that exact picture in that scene.
Oh, really? Because I think the picture is what makes it not a dream. Because
that too.
Yeah.
Like that's where I kind of find it hard to grok exactly. Like I feel like they placed it there. Like the stuff that happens in the scene, I think actually did happen.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's positioned as this dream
Gotcha.
to maybe kind of like blur the edges of what may or may not have credulity, you know?
Yeah.
Because I always thought it was kind of like, this is another thing where you watch this movie a million times, you start thinking about this stuff, but it's like, so the way Kyle Reese explains it is that John Connor picks him to go back in time to save his mom.
Yep. And
But
give birth to
before
him.
that, yes. But before that happens, he's already given him this picture, and Kyle Reese has already fallen in love with Sarah Connor.
Yes.
So is this something that John Connor did knowing that this was going to have to happen? And so he knows that
he's
Kyle
priming
Reese,
the pump, basically.
Yeah, Kyle Reese is his dad. He knows that going in.
Yep.
So he's doing everything in his power he can to make sure that Kyle Reese falls in love with his mom.
Yeah.
It's like a reverse Back to the Future kind of.
Yep. Yeah. No, I also wonder about in the context of the first movie, it doesn't matter as much. But the other thing I was thinking of, I have not seen any of the shitty sequels that the Terminators have spewed out in the past 2 decades. But like, what do they ever get to a point where Sarah Connor could meet child Reese?
No, because he was born after
Judgment Day.
He was born after Judgment Day, and I think the implication is generally that she does not survive Judgment Day. I could be wrong, but
None of the modern movies touch on that at all. That she
in part 3, she is dead.
Oh,
and
that's
that
right.
takes place before Judgment Day.
Yeah,
but
that's
I
when
mean,
they
I don't know
bunker
how much-
themselves at the end, right?
Yeah, great ending, bad movie. So I don't think so.
Oh,
They
okay.
introduce young Kyle Reese in Terminator Salvation, which is already deep into
The war.
the war, and they don't even bring up Sarah
I
Connor
forgot that she dies or is not around in the third one, but then because she's in the most recent one, right? The term.
Yeah, that I can't refer. I forget how they hand wave that. It's something about like the future ends up getting changed because of. I don't know,
This is
I
where
can't remember.
it starts losing its.
Because they in the new one they killed John Connor, young John Connor, in the first like 10 minutes.
Oh,
So basically, it's a sequel to T2, where after T2 they all go to Mexico, and then another Terminator shows up and kills John Connor.
There's a lot of different timelines that you can exist in, I suppose.
Yeah, there's lots of crazy shit going on.
Yeah, that's when it loses it.
Yeah, it's like I always found it strange because the way that he describes the psychiatrist, the time travel aspect, is like I always thought it was something they did in the moment very quickly. So it's
considering sending him back after the Terminator.
The Terminators get sent back, and they're like, "Shit, they sent the Terminator back. We got to send somebody back." And so they pick Reese and they send Reese back.
Yes,
but then when Reese is telling Sarah about it, it sounds like he's been
planning.
He's been groomed. He's been groomed to be the one.
Yeah,
which I guess those two things are not, mutually exclusive. I guess if John Connor knows that this is going to happen at some point,
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess you could just have it played from the point of view of John Connor knows this is going to happen, and so he's grooming Reese so that when they get the moment in that timeline, it does make sense that the Terminator still gets to the time travel device first, and they have to live through it again. So yeah, it's actually kind of a relatively clean, just because they don't get too sloppy with stuff. At any point.
Between this movie and the second movie, as far as time travel movies with kind of like paradoxes at the center of them, it's pretty cleanly plotted out.
Yeah. No, it isn't. It's a good thing about it.
I'm a friend of Sarah Connor. I was told that she's here. Could I see her, please?
No, can't see her. She's making a statement.
Where is she?
Look, it may take a while. If you want to wait, there's a bench over there.
I'll be back.
What's your favorite Arnold look? The punk Arnold, the leather jacket Arnold, naked Arnold.
My favorite is
skinless robot Arnold.
My favorite is when he shows up and he starts chasing them out of the techno noir club.
Yeah.
He gets blown up, and all it does is gives him a shitty haircut and no eyebrows.
Yeah, it just burns his eyebrows off.
It doesn't cleanly burn his hair. It just gives him a shitty Floby haircut at that point.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite look is no eyebrows, Floby haircut Arnold.
Yeah. I was always, because I watched T2 first before I ever saw the first one. And so I was, of course, like, oh, the Terminator, he dresses like a biker.
Yes.
So when I watched the first one, I gravitated towards that look more. But the more I watched the movie, the more I liked the punk look.
Yeah, I like the
gray jacket.
Yeah,
that's a cool look. I like that.
Yeah, it's he's one thing I did like about this that I don't know if it's as clean in the second one is that I like the fact that over the course of this one, the Terminator's taking damage and looking more and more fucked up as it continues its mission, which they probably do in T2 as well. But I feel like you really notice it here.
They definitely do it in T2, but it's a lot more localized to the third act.
Okay.
Like once things really start rolling, that's when he starts taking a lot of damage because like he ends up in that final fight missing an arm.
Yes, as all of as a matter of the climax. But here, his first interaction causes damage to him that he has to cover up so that no one can tell.
Yeah, they don't do that as much as in the second one, but they do that thing that they do a lot in these movies where they introduce these kind of mechanics where. In this one, they have the time to sit with it for a minute, and so they can put in details like his skin is dying.
Yeah.
And so he stinks, and there are flies swarming on him.
Yeah.
which is a great detail that never comes up ever again in the franchise.
Yeah. I like his sort of very Predator-esque scene of repairing himself. I like all that stuff. I think that's pretty good.
I think the prosthetics look. I mean, I think his look at the end with the exposed skull looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the robotic, the animatronic head stuff where they're doing like the eye,
like looking
removal
around
and all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely you definitely know it's fake. But actually, once he puts the sunglasses on, when they move the head around that way, it looks more realistic for some reason. I'm not really sure why that is.
Yeah, you just lose the eyes, and it's still a wax face, but it's
it's always the eyes with that stuff.
The cut is like the cut going from when he's doing surgery to him having the shades on and looking at himself. That cut is the most jarring, I feel like, because you go back to a normal person. But
yeah, it's not. It's not quite as jarring as when they do that in Alien, where it's like they go from Ian Holm to a toy head they bought at Party City
with milk covered all over it. Yeah. Yep. Erickson.
I also I can't not see this now when I watch it. When he's doing the eye thing, they do a close up of him picking up a X-Acto knife.
Yeah.
And obviously, because you can't get that close to your eye with an X-Acto knife, when they do the wide shot and he brings it up to his eye, you can see that there's no blade in the thing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a quick shot. Like if you're watching it, you're not going to notice it. But again, watching it a million times, it's like, oh yeah, there's no blade there, so he can just bring the thing up to his eye really quickly.
Eric Santuan says, I'm more partial to T2. I was like 15 the summer of 1991, so you can probably imagine how that hit me. And I still think it's the better film, but The Terminator is definitely a great film too, and pound for pound, a model of efficiency and ingenuity. You can tell Jim Cameron cut his teeth working for Roger Corman. He put all those lessons in low-rent filmmaking to good use. But an influence that I never see mentioned is John Carpenter. He definitely picked a thing or two up from behind-the-scenes stint on Escape from New York, and I've always thought The Terminator feels like something Carpenter might have made. It wasn't shot by Dean Cundy, but it may have been. Look at the framing, the lighting, and listen to the music. Did Cameron ask Bud Fidel to imitate the Carpenter Howarth style? I don't know, but it sure sounds like he did. Anyway, glad the series is back, gents. Keep at it.
Yeah, I've never directly thought about that, but yes, this is very much a movie John Carpenter could have made.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a little less high octane from him, because Cameron is a much more kinetic, energetic action director than Carpenter is, I think.
Yeah.
But as far as subject matter, absolutely. And yeah, it's the camera work in this is great. Like, it's a beautiful looking movie. That kind of blue tint that things have and the diffused lights in the background looks really, really great.
Yeah.
And the Roger Corman stuff comes through. Dick Miller's in this movie as the guy who runs the gun shop. He's a mainstay of Corman's stuff. I've always loved that scene because he's picking out all these guns and then he just casually asks for a phased plasma rifle with a 40-watt range. Like, he's just like, I had to try. I don't know what you have, what you don't have.
What year is it? What year? Yeah. Hey, buddy, what's on the shelf or whatever it is. Yeah, I don't. It feels like the kind of scene that I don't know, gun shops. Like, are guns sold like that? Is that a possibility to even happen? If a robot walked in and bought a gun, do you just have the shells laying around on the counter that you can put in your gun? I don't know.
I don't know if it's exactly like that anymore. Maybe 40 years ago. Yeah. I've always been amazed that
he's in LA.
Yeah. I've always been amazed that he even goes through the formality of asking to see the guns.
Yes, yeah,
and doesn't just smash through and kill the guy and take everything.
Yeah. It's a. It's kind of a weird. I think they must have done something super effective here. It never crosses my mind while watching this movie. How is the Terminator evading capture from people? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's an unidentifiable person. It's this huge Austrian guy with a million guns and wearing leather. And for some reason, he's always very effective at sort of getting around and hiding himself. Again, it's a credit to the movie that I never think about that at all. Yeah. But it's also a credit to the concept, really, about, like, if you have a cyborg that just is a robot that looks human, what would it take to notice that you had to? Even Reese himself in the movie says that he has to wait for the Terminator to make a move so that he knows who it is.
Right. Yeah.
It's clever.
Yeah. And I think they're leaning on some of the slasher movie, horror movie logic there too.
Yes.
Because he has a very similar movement pattern to, like, Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees.
Gets away from the car crash with no one seeing it, even though the cops are right there to see everything.
Yeah. And he never runs. He just walks very
quickly.
And when the scene is over and he is gone, he is just gone. Like, there's no scene where he's running from the cops or anything like that.
Yeah.
I did want to mention that the scene at the police station. I got to say, that's a pretty harrowing scene in and of itself. But, man, that scene really lands different with me in year of our Lord 2024, where this stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Him walking in there and just so casually gunning everybody down is very disturbing.
Yeah, the terror of that strikes me differently now than it used to. Just with things, like Uvalde or whatever kind of shootings that you can imagine. It's the inability to escape, I think, comes through quite well in that. And it's obviously heightened in that the fact that in reality, no one's taking these amount of shots or whatever, dealing with the fight against them in the way that he is here. But it is to be trapped in a claustrophobic environment like that with him I think that the terror works on me more now as an adult than it did when I was younger.
Yeah, definitely.
Was younger, it was more just like an action sequence, really.
Right.
More than anything.
I never thought twice about it until the last couple times I watched it, where I was like, man, that's a little too real.
Tom Hickey says, hey, buddy, you got a dead cat in there or what? I asked ChatGPT and it replied, that's quite an unusual question. Is everything all right? The Terminator is a classic in the pantheon of AI in the movies. Ignoring T2, The Terminator is a lean and mean movie in its own right. It introduces a wild sci-fi concept. Future soldier impregnates the mother of the human resistance against AI machines, which then try to assassinate said mother, but gets away with it by keeping the story tight and focused. In a movie featuring a time-traveling killer robot, the most unrealistic moment is Sarah Connor needing to consult a Spanish translation book to say "gasolina, por favor." You can just point. You don't need to look that up.
It is one of those great scenes though, where she goes out of her way to find the Spanish words, and then he's just like, "Oh yes, you'd like gas."
Yeah, fill her up.
Yeah, fill her up. Yeah.
She's
not assuming
No,
that everybody in Mexico speaks English. It's very,
but she's not in a Mexican Walmart either. She is.
That's true.
There's one reason you stop at this Mexican gas station, and it's not to get the hot dogs.
That's true. That's a good point.
And Kyle Barrett is our last comment. The Terminator, I can't believe you two actually lived in the 80s. It looks disgusting. It's obviously a great film, and its biggest storytelling strength might be that it's an absolute masterclass in exposition. I watched and rewatched T2 for years before I ever saw the first film, so Arnold as a villain always feels weird to me. It's interesting that one of the most iconic action heroes had his big break playing a villain. It's a good performance, wisely keeping his dialogue to a minimum. A lot of people judge others by their accent, but I think that's wrong. I judge them way before they open their mouths. It's usually around this point in my comment that I would debase myself with a foul joke about semen or something, but instead, I'm just going to ask you to read the following genuine quote from Schwarzenegger about the pleasure of pumping iron, preferably in your best Arnie impression. It's as satisfying to me as coming, and having sex with a woman and coming, and so you can believe how much I'm in heaven. I'm getting the feeling of coming in a gym, and I'm getting the feeling of coming at home. I'm feeling the feeling of coming backstage when I pump up. When I pose in front of 5,000 people, I get the same feeling. So I'm coming day and night. I mean, it's terrific, right? So I'm in heaven. That's Arnold talking about coming.
Did you see the Arnold documentary on Netflix?
No, I've never seen it.
Highly recommend. It's 3 parts covering the three distinct parts of his life. Mm-hmm. And he talks about that pumping iron documentary, and specifically that scene where he's like, I just made that up. It just sounded good.
I think the only history he needs to know, the Bill Burr has that bit about Arnold being a great man, which I think is a perfect summation of Schwarzenegger's career, which is how hard it is to get famous. It's like I work out. This guy got famous for working out. It's like he came over, he became an action star, even though he can't speak the language of the place that he's in. He marries into the royalty of the family. Why wouldn't he assume that he could fuck his maid in his own bed and not get away with it? That's what you get. That's what you get.
Yeah.
That's it for Terminator. That's Real Ripe and Real Rotten talking about Terminator. It's always hard to talk about the classic movies, Clay. I think we did a good job just because everyone said everything there is to say.
We didn't even really talk about the final sequence,
like the animatronic Terminator.
Yeah, I don't know what there is really to say. It's fantastic.
It looks great. Looks good.
It really does.
Although it's whenever they have the over the shoulder shot of the Terminator walking towards them. I can only imagine like the grip underneath it, just like holding this thing and walking and shaking it at them and stuff.
That is one of the things that I love about T2 is because in this one, clearly they only had the top half of the body made.
Right. Yeah.
And like some feet that they could do close-ups with. And the very first shot in the next one, it's just like Stan Winston taking his dick out. It's like, here's a full top to bottom animatronic Terminator, bitches.
Yeah, panning up from the legs all the way up to the head. Here it is, walking around. Yep. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Real Ripe and Real Rotten. We'll be back with End of Days is the worst Schwarzenegger movie, and we'll be back to talk about that one, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show at patreon.com/The Penske File. And then after we do End of Days, we'll decide what the B-roll is. I'll probably put a poll up. It's going to be either that Russian movie or maybe you can come up with a poll suggestion, Clay, and we can put it up and see what happens to win.
My first choice would be Last Action Hero.
Okay.
Because that's sort of where his career starts to take a turn.
Okay. Yeah, well, we can put that on the poll and see what people think. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. So, Clay, where would you stand on Terminator at the very end? It sounds we're both pretty positive on it, but you think it's deserving of where being Arnold's best movie?
I think if we're talking just Arnold, I think his performance in T2 is better.
Yep.
I think he's doing more interesting stuff. I think the character's obviously more interesting. Yeah, just knowing what I know about how these ratings tend to work, I'm still kind of shocked that T2 is not rated higher than this.
Yeah.
But I think I probably, I don't know. It all depends on which one I've watched most recently.
Yeah.
So I think this one's fantastic. Then I'm going to probably watch T2 and go, no, this one's better. And then I'll watch T1 again at some point and be like, no, I like this one. But, they're so closely matched. And excel at the same things, but in different ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So it is weirdly an Alien and Aliens situation, except they were both made by the same guy.
Yeah, I think if given the option, I would say I would rather watch T2 if someone said, which one would you rather watch?
Yeah.
However, my only caveat is that for just by happenstance with Amy and everything, I've seen Terminator quite a bit recently, like more than I've seen a lot of other movies in a short period of time. I've watched it multiple times. And I don't know if this is true. Like I don't know if T2 would hold up to rewatch the way that this one does. This one's so quick that it's like that's almost kind of the best thing you can say about it is that I've seen it a bunch recently and I still find it very watchable. T2 might be a little bit on the bloated, sounds like the wrong word, but it's bigger in the way that it's not quite as digestible as this one is.
Yeah.
So
it's the arena rock version.
Yeah.
It's got the extended drum solo in the middle.
Excellent.
Also, one fun detail that I wanted to mention, speaking of drum solos, Brad Fiedel did the music, obviously. The time signature of the Terminator theme actually doesn't exist, I think is how he puts it, because when he programmed the drums, he did it incorrectly. So if you actually go through and try to time out the beats of the Terminator theme, there's not a set time signature for the song. So if you listen for that, you can kind of hear it because the melody comes in at different points on that dun 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 dun.
Oh, I see.
Dun 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 dun. Like that's
so he just stumbled into like a polyrhythm essentially, where it lines up but does not line up at the same time.
Yeah, what he did was what he was trying to do, like that syncopated like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun. But it doesn't line up to a formal time signature.
Yeah,
but in the second one, he fixes it, so it actually does. But yeah, go back and listen to the theme and try to time it out, and it's weird. It works, but it shouldn't.
It's a great theme.
Yeah, it really is.
That's it for Terminator. We'll be back with End of Days, which is at, I think, 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it'll be a different experience. So here we go. Thanks, everybody. Real Ripe and Real Rotten is back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Clay, thanks for talking about the Terminator. And we'll be back next 2 weeks, I think, with End of Days. See ya.
Glad to be back.
Hasta la vista.